How has being a father changed you?
Yeah, I'll say this with pride. I mean, when my daughter came into this world, I just lost it. It was a beautiful day.
Yeah,
Still is every day. It's just as amazing.
yeah, yeah.
So, to see her grow, I have people, people that are older. It's like, oh, terrible twos are the worst. I'm like, I don't see it. Every year was great. I mean, I know I have things to work on with my daughter, but I just look at it as a gift. But now she's 20. Now she's focused on her life. Now we're going through different phases. That has been something you have to work towards and work at rather. And she continues to blossom. She's a
Welcome to the Cardinal Way for Men. My name is Ed Cardinal, and this is the next man up. Transformational, candid conversations with men. And it's a pleasure to have, actually was a college roommate on Dirk, and Dirk's coming to us from New York City. And we're going to stay away from our college stories because this would not be the appropriate place to be talking about some of the things that we've done. But I can tell you this, that Dirk was an amazing practical joker, and a lot of fun to be around. And it's been great to stay connected with him. I mean, we were in college back in the early 80s, and have stayed in touch, and even recently been more connected than we were maybe for the past 20 years or so. So welcome, Dirk.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me here. I'm honored to be on your show, and your viewers. Have anyone listened to anything I have to say?
I'm sure there's going to be some men that will glean some stuff from what you have to say.
We'll see.
Well, I'm going to start with your upbringing and maybe the messages you got culturally, or maybe from your family or from the media, about what it means to be a man, and how that might have influenced the way you are as a man. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think we're all programmed. And for me, the programming was interesting. As I reflect, it wasn't the easiest upbringing for me, but I was born in Germany. I was a year and a half old. Came to the U.S. My dad had a lot of experience in marine engineering, naval architecture, building ships. U.S. Navy kind of discovered him, and he got secret clearance. So we were moving every 2 or 3 years on some Navy project that he couldn't talk about, and he would just allude to. And years later, I'd learn about it. But lived out a bunch of places on the West Coast, lived down south, and later lived out on the East Coast. And so it was just constantly moving and kind of getting regrounded. And then German upbringing. You talk about being a man, masculinity. Very very kind of stoic. Humble, be humble, kind of Northern European upbringing values, and mix that with all the American influences we were having, the John Waynes, the different stages of growing up, Ronald Reagan, so many different influences. Bruce Jenner was actually a big influence for me. Look at how that turned out. But a lot of different influences, and I was fortunate. I could adapt kind of at each place we moved to. I was really into being an athlete, and by the time the hardest move was from San Diego to Connecticut, That was just when I started high school. So a lot of different influences. And I'd say kind of decided to stay on the East Coast after that. But, we can get into kind of all the details of it all, but that's just for the viewers, kind of where I come from, how I was programmed.
Right.
I'm pretty much, as you know, an optimist at heart. So everything kind of had a good influence.
Yeah.
For
What
my-
what were some of those messages you got from, let's see, being of German descent, how you're supposed to be stoic, so not expressing emotions was part of that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, suck it up, buttercup, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I had it a lot harder than you did. Both my parents grew up as children, really, in World War II, and saw a lot of bad stuff, especially my dad, and super quiet about it. Just took years and years to figure out some of the things that happened to him. And we don't need to go into it here, but very much that, like, you're given lemons, you make lemonade, and you say thank you for it, and just get it done kind of mentality, and suck it up, and yeah, just move forward, keep moving forward,
Right.
And well, what about my feelings? It's like, well,
Yeah, men aren't supposed to have feelings.
Complaint box, maybe. But I always had a sense of humor about everything, and that's kind of where my dad and I kind of differed on a lot of things. And he told me one time, I had made some comment on something he was saying, and he is very straight to the point. Things are either black and white, and I'd always take that, no, they're gray, and have some kind of comical response. And he just kind of looked at me one time and said, you got to understand, in my upbringing, the German book of humor is very thin, so the wires like would cross in his head, like, what are you talking about, but I was able to deal with a lot of things, just, I think, out of humor and
I think
optimism, I guess.
Yeah, that was probably definitely one of your coping mechanisms, but actually one of your strengths also. I mean, it's great to have a good sense of humor, and that's what I enjoyed being around you, because I sometimes have a tendency to be too serious. So you kind of lighten things up and make things fun. Well, how was that move from San Diego to Connecticut tough? You said it was that was a tough one for you.
Yeah, I wasn't really into school. My in San Diego, I think the three things that influenced my life the most were my surfboard, my skateboard, and my newspaper route, and fourth to be my friends. And so I just loved I love the beach environment. I've always been a big fan of I'm a big water fan. I love anything near around the water. And so San Diego was just heaven. I mean,
Sure.
And my dad was doing a lot of stuff around the main shipyard there in San Diego. So life was great. I just thought that was, the greatest thing I'm going to do in my life is to take a road trip with a bunch of buddies into Mexico and go surf the whole country, and so, life wasn't too hard. I didn't really focus much on school at the time. Suddenly I moved to New Canaan, Connecticut, and man, that was just an awakening for me. This was at the time like one of the top public high schools in the country.
Right.
These were, freshman year, people were talking about where they're going to college, and it was Ivy League, and I was behind. I was, and so talk about peer pressure. I had to catch up with everything. So,
Right. Yeah.
But I was still fighting San Diego. I just love San Diego so much. I showed up the first day to school with, I think, OP shorts, tops and a shirt. I was going to have nothing to do with these uptight you know, kids and their
That
families.
that Fairfield County, I mean, probably one of the wealthiest areas of the country. But San Diego is not too shabby either, but completely different lifestyle you're talking about.
But it was good. It was good because it kind of woke me up, and I really focused on school.
Right.
And
Yeah.
got
So,
me before. Always did sports, and so sorry, I didn't interrupt.
no, it's all right. So that was the sports was sort of your saving grace.
Yeah, it was my line in. I always picked up on a sport and just you know I'd always been an athlete and could do relatively well. So I got into skiing. I got into I was always into running, soccer, wrestling, all kinds of different things. But it just you know I got to really get my core group of friends kind of going there and
Right.
and adapt and adapt.
Yeah. So Dirk, you talked about your upbringing and some of the messages that you got. How did that impact you going into relationships or any other aspect of your life, and then maybe in a negative way? And then how did you sort of overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, Ed, you know me. I'm annoyingly optimistic. I think that's a couple of friends have said to me. Like it's that whole giving lemons and turn it into lemonade kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to see the opportunities in things, but as far as relationships, look, my mom and dad, you know, they had their troubles, but you know, they were a unit. You know, they were a very strong unit, and you know, loved each other as they went through. My dad had some really challenging, you know, careers and are moving, but it had a good model there, kind of to look at. You know, I don't think it was ideal, but they were still together. You know, 86 and 87 today,
Wow. That's awesome.
still very in love with each other. You know,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that helped me. I think that was the core of it. I think relationship wise, just understanding people, just kind of going down the path of you know understanding a relationship and adding it to your kind of programming and what worked and doesn't work and being very realistic about it. You know, I just try to, you know, relationships are very important to me, whether they're friendships, whether they're romantic, whether it's family,
Mm-hmm.
priority for me. And so, that's just a core value I have. I you know, like to stay in touch with people,
Right.
like
Yeah.
what's going on, to know how I can help.
Yeah.
I don't know if it comes around masculinity or not, but yeah, I guess doing it in my own way and doing it in a humble way. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, that article I forwarded on to you about kind of really reaching out to people at times and saying how much they're of value to you. You know, we just don't do it enough. So
Right.
I take a lot of pride in just staying in touch with friends and reaching out and you know, sometimes they're not as good coming back, but you know, there's certain friends, like I think our friendship, which we by a year or two and touch base and just be right back on track, you know, and other friendships are not that easy. So it's a work in progress.
Right. And it does take some effort. And I have to say, you have been phenomenal with that. You're a connector.
You're very difficult to work with.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I might be one of those people that, you know, might not be as good as you are, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you, Dirk.
Well,
Yeah. I find you to be a great connector. Also, like you said, you want to help people, and you have a lot of knowledge, organizational skills, and you've helped me a lot, even with this platform and what I'm trying to do in helping men. You've helped me in some way, sort of sending me things through text about check this check this podcast out. I think you might like it. And I really find that helpful. And I also feel your support in that process. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important to me. I hope I kind of show that, it's
absolutely. And you're right. You sent me the article about happiness, and then I sent you another one about that Harvard research. That's the longest running research project in the country since the 1930s. And that happiness for men is about their social connections, about the friendships. And that's what really matters. And I think if we base it on that, I would say you're probably a pretty happy person, because you do have a significant social network. And part of that is because you continue to maintain connections with people, and you make the effort to do so. So thank
yeah,
you.
I mean, what I got out of that, and maybe we can even add it to the podcast in the comment section, is just not so much about the numbers. I mean, we live in this, and I'm in technology, and I love technology, but we've evolved to just there's more anxiety in our society now. There's more around social media. People, yeah, you go and someone's got 3,000 friends on Instagram or Facebook, but it's really, the article to me, it was more about the quality,
Absolutely.
and really just have a handful of really close friends, and like anything else, like a a relationship with your wife or your girlfriend, you got to work at it, and you got to friendships, and you got to stay connected, and that evolves too as we get closer. There's different influences. There's the influence when someone gets married. There's an influence when they have kids, or they retire, or they move somewhere else. So you just got to adapt, and I think just kind of keep working at it.
Right. Absolutely.
Comfortable with it.
So Dirk, how is the Dirk from, let's say, college years to where we are now? We just turned 60. I think you're my age, turned 60 last year. And how have you evolved since your late teens, early 20s to where you are now? I know there's a lot of life experience, but how have you evolved?
That's a great question, Ed. How I've evolved. I mean, I think, yeah, I think that you can't help but have experiences and try to learn from it, from them. And I've tried to just make it a positive influence and say, well, that was a mistake, and not fixate on wow, that was a big mistake. You can't go forward in this life without having some regrets, and just keep them in perspective. But we're living in an amazing day and age, and there's so much ahead of us still to learn and to experience. And I don't, I think one of the things I really kind of hold really true is just in my relationships and people I meet, I just try to keep it in perspective. This whole mindset of like, I'm not better than anyone else, and no one is better than me. And I have something to learn from each person that I meet, and just that kind of interest in learning, whether it's an Uber driver or whether it's sitting next to a captain of industry, and just trying to understand who they are, and whether it's a friend from high school. Just trying to stay open-minded and realize that everybody's gone through something, and just give a little space to people. And I think I'm just much more patient than I was. I think I was a hyper kid, when I grew up, and nobody knew what a hyper kid kind of was back in those days. And I've just kind of mellowed over time to just slow down, not slow down because I'm beaten, just slow down to try to listen to people more. And less feeling like I have to put something out there. Just let the situation evolve and be patient. And this whole I think it's Confucius that said something like, if you're talking, you're not listening, right? So
Right.
here I am on this podcast doing a lot of talking.
Yeah, but that's the but
Focus, really trying to focus on listening to people and understanding where they're coming,
yeah, yeah.
looking at their, I don't know.
It reminds me of that saying, you have two ears and one mouth, use them proportionally, you know.
Yeah,
Eh,
that's, I think that's great advice. It'll probably take me another decade to even understand that one a little better. But
yeah.
I think it's but just to give people space and to understand they're all dealing with some kind of demons or challenges in their own life.
Yeah.
Just trying to have a positive influence on people as they get older. What can I kind of do for others? When I'm younger, it's like, what can people do for me? What's coming to me? What do I owe? I should have this. What do I have to kind of do and have this kind of crazy treadmill and just trying to breathe. And, we have a whole different, group of issues now to deal with. And part of it is just, relax and stay healthy and mentally and physically and kind of get to this next phase in our life and the people around us.
You bring up two good points in what you just said. You said you always try to be teachable. So you're asking people questions to learn from them, but also learn about them. And you're very good at that. And then, the other thing is listening, being a good listener. That's part of a great communicator is listening and being patient, because when you're patient, you're not thinking about what it is you want to say and get your opinion in there when someone's talking, so that you end up talking over them. So when you're patient, you're listening. So that's a great point, Dirk.
Yeah, if I could add, I mean, there's a great. I love quotes. I collect quotes. I'm influenced by quotes all the time that I see them. But I think there's so much to be said about just being patient and listening to someone. When you're listening to really understand them, as opposed to listening for what you're going to say next, right? And I think a lot of growing up, you listen to like it's a ping pong match, like to go back to someone. But if you really, I've noticed more the pause that people have after they talk. This like Elon Musk is one. Like, you ask him a question, and in the interviews he'll just pause and he'll think about it, and what he's going to come back with is going to be just well thought out, or maybe not, but he's going to give some thought to it, and so how important is it to ask really intelligent questions and not just this machine gunning of questions and just kind of try to get in that mindset. So sorry to interrupt, but to get in that mindset of just really listening to someone and not just getting that ping pong match back and forth,
Right. And that going back to patience as a listener, but you just brought up a point about Elon Musk, taking that pause and really sort of thinking about what you want to say when you do speak, so that you're not just, like you said, that ping pong match where you're just spitting things out there without really thinking it through. So as a person who is speaking about something, patience is also important.
Yes, for sure. And to bring back to your overriding question, I mean, that's no surprise, but life teaches you patience. I hope it teaches you patience. And so I'm very Zen in that way, and they're trying to go with the flow of that and try to understand that, and with everything in your life, trying to have a pattern to a flow, and trying to listen to it a little better, listen to yourself.
Right. I know you're on a health journey. That's something that you and I have connected on. What does your health routine look like? What have you incorporated in your life? I mean, you've always been into exercise. We knew each other through running back in college. And so what are you doing for your health, and how has that changed as you've gotten older?
Yeah, thanks, Ed. No, it's really important to me. Yeah, when I was younger, again, that hyperactive kid, I was always a good runner. I mean, just about every sport I did, I had great cardio. And I think I kind of wore myself out a little bit when I was young. I think my knees are now questioning, what's going on here. But my workout now is a lot working out wise, I lift 3 times a week. I do a lot of walking. I've gotten back into yoga, which, Ed, you and I have talked about.
Mhm.
And it's for me, working out is not only just the physical part of it, but just to get into the mental part of it. I have to go out and do something every day because I'm sitting a lot, and
Right.
or I'm traveling and going somewhere. But I have to get that time, and wherever I can squeeze that in. So yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed kind of getting back into yoga. I found a really good center to go to, and just trying to have more flexibility in my life. I also try to incorporate a lot more about what I eat, and that's getting maybe more towards a Mediterranean diet, and more, and getting farther and farther away from processed foods, and more fruits and vegetables and everything we try here. And then for me, what's really helped me kind of keep it together has been I only eat between the hours of noon and 8 o'clock. So intermittent fasting is really helpful to me to kind of control. And it just gets harder and harder, I think, you get older, to try to have a routine, to try to have some kind of strength in your life, to try to have some kind of flexibility, to have some kind of endurance. It's just an ongoing thing. We're in such a society of just sitting around and, and not getting your steps in. And so just trying to really work on that. And so I just love when I can have the time to really enjoy. I really look forward to the time I can peel away and just get a workout in, and reconnect mind wise. And I'm trying to get back into meditating at least a little bit every day.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's important to you, and I've really, I think there's Ray Dalio speaks, of transcendental meditation and how it's helped him, and just these influences just kind of helped a lot. And one of my great sayings is just put the word out to the universe, and the universe responds.
Yeah.
When you kind of have a positive outlook to it, and you try to incorporate kind of healthier stuff, it just shows up in so many different ways if you're paying attention and trying to watch. And so, especially at this age, at any age, just trying to be healthier.
Right.
I drink more water. I try to sleep better, like all those kind of things. And I'm really trying to focus on longevity and reading and learning about it. And
right.
some good sources out there.
Yeah, those are great core, I feel, the foundational pieces to good health. And you talked about hydration, sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And I might add breathing, good breathing techniques. What is your meditation? What does that look like these days? What are you doing for meditation?
Pretty poor.
But let's say when you do meditate, what is that?
A big believer in, I'm very organized in kind of what I do, and how I spend my days. And so, I have all my calendars and all my whiteboards and all those kind of big project things and prioritizing. But I've learned that a little post-it note every day of kind of what are my priorities and how much time am I going to allocate to that. And at the top of them, I always put mind, body, soul, and F for friends and family, right?
Yep.
MS, MB, SF. And so, if I can get to it early on, I try to do it in the morning. I usually turn on a meditation video on YouTube and just try to go through it. And I'm happier when it's 10 minutes, but even if I can get just 10 minutes, the yoga is helping me more with that, but it's definitely something I've been lacking and trying to get focused more. And when I do it, I definitely feel like I see the results.
Yeah.
I mean, Ray Dalio, I think, does it in the morning, and then he does it in the afternoon, and 15, 20 minutes, he just raves about it. And they promote, they promote transcendental meditation in his company, Bridgewater.
Yeah. Who are you listening to for meditation? Anyone in particular, or?
No, I just kind of, I've been searching around. Sorry to say I don't have anyone in particular, but if you got any suggestions that
I do. You might want to check out Dr. Joe Dispenza. That's someone recently I've been listening to his talks, but also his meditation. And it's important to do those sorts of practices first thing in the morning and just before you go to bed at night. And he talks about this because you're in that sort of alpha state still from coming out of sleep before you get into the beta, which is more the conscious state. So it's good to be in that state when you're meditating. I'll do a breath work before that, but that's who I've been following for my meditations. And like you, it's like 10 to 15 minutes. That's the ones I look for.
Take a look.
Yeah. I think you'll like his stuff. He's good. And he talks about the importance of gratitude also.
Yes.
And I know that's something that you've talked about. So what are you grateful for in your life these days?
I'll get to that. There's one other piece I want to add, just kind of in the list of something that I've been trying to kind of focus on too, and that's just the management of technology. Like as pro technology as I am, I'm early engineer undergrad, and then a lot early internet, and just love technology, love to learn about technology and everything that's going on, and I think it's the greatest. I've heard it's explained as it's the greatest generation gap of all time, right? Like us old farts versus like the new the Gen Zers that just adapt so quickly to stuff. And it's just coming all around us all the time. I went and looked. I got a demo of the Apple Vision Pro, which is their virtual reality or augmented reality glasses, and it was unbelievable, like where this is all going, right? Where some of this is going, and visually, our interface. You got to manage that. I mean, there's all kinds of studies about the impact that phones have on young minds, the blue light, we're watching all these screens, we're sitting at our desks, all these kind of things. We're going out, we're becoming more introvert. Our breathing has become shorter, right? We don't breathe as long as we used to. So I guess one thing I just want to put out there and maybe add it to the list is we just have to be able to manage technology in our lives and try to simplify things and realize we need time to either walk in nature or take a vacation with our. There's so many things, just like I call it escapism. There's so many forms of escapism that we have to try to stay away from people being addicted to gaming to all the other things that are out there that
right. Pornography is a big one too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To people that just take things to an extreme and then just finding that balance. So
right.
But
you bring up a good point. My demographics of the men that I'm trying to help is 45 and older, because I fall into that demographic. But what I'm doing when I'm learning through my research is, and you mentioned this, that population of young men in their 20s and even younger in their late teens is really struggling big time, more than I ever imagined. And it's because of technology. They do not know how to have relationships, and they're getting involved in less relationships because of it. And it's impacting them on not only a social level, but the mental health, their physical health, as you said, sitting longer, not breathing. If you're not breathing correctly, that's going to affect your health also. So there's a lot of different components that their life is affected by because of technology, and it's really essential.
That is the anxiety that's being built up, the things we think we got to do. And honestly, I think, men's role has changed so much. Like, you know, I have a great relationship with my mom, and I have a good relationship with my dad. And I think I really had these two different worlds where my dad was the ultimate disciplinarian, and my mom was just like just an amazing friend that I could just confide in and just be myself. And so I kind of lived in these two worlds, and I just think this day and age is just there's just so many challenges. I mean, for women, they're so being called on to be CEOs and come out of their shells and be an amazing wife and an amazing business partner, an amazing mom, and an amazing housekeeper. Just the list just goes on, right? That just all these amazing things they have to do. Almost like a Martha Stewart at times too. You've got to make a great home, and you got to do this, and you got to be able to cook and do all these things. And we as men have become like, we are less called to, our traditional roles, and there's this kind of new definition. And so we kind of have to adapt to this too. Like and also as we get older, we're less kind of, we're less needed, and just our roles have just changed so much.
Yeah. Which is probably a good thing too. That old role is obsolete. So
Yeah.
we've got to, we sort of have to reimagine ourselves, reinvent ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And so we kind of get to, in a sense we get diminished, but in another sense we kind of have this new opportunity to kind of redefine ourselves and
exactly
learn how, what's the family unit, who's running the family, and what are they doing, and how are they checking in, but really defining whether it's a matriarch or a patriarch, I think that's becoming more blurred, but that should ultimately be, as we age, like our ultimate goal is to be the head of the family and to be there for the needs and the well-being of all the other up and coming generations, so I got to define that again, and try to be good, sane, moral people going forward, and be, do things in our community and do things for that family and those friends that are so important to us. And so there's just a lot of change. It's amazing.
It's pretty amazing as I'm getting deeper into this mission of mine. It started out wanting to help men in that demographic I talked about, 45 and older, and it still is. But I'm also seeing something else, that we as men in that age group, as we do more of our own work and get healthier, that we're going to need to be role models and help that generation that's younger. So we need to do the work first, and then we need to help that generation.
Absolutely. And as we get older, maybe it's not, maybe you're not gunning to be the, managing director of a company, but there's so much need to find a charity or a group that's not getting help and help them. I'm trying to determine the different charities, organizations that are doing kind of good in the world, and there's so much need. I think in our age group, a lot of men also just turn off. They just say like, well, I'm not needed anymore. You're always needed. Always something.
Absolutely.
Okay, maybe you retire, but then that's your opportunity now to do something else. And sure, if you want to hang out on the golf course all the time, that's okay too. But what about getting more involved in your community, getting involved in your church, getting involved in different groups you think that are out there to just do some good. And there's so many kids that need guidance and families that need. There's just so much to be done as we kind of get older and stay.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what you're talking about is definitely a cultural thing because in other cultures, I know like in Southeast Asia, and my wife is her mom was Filipina, and the elders were revered for their
Yeah.
wisdom, and they were, they remained a part of the family, and they still taught, and they were looked up to, and they were taken care of, and um, that's kind of not the case in our culture. Where the elders are put in, nursing homes, and they're forgotten, they're neglected. But you're right as far as
Right. There's
that.
like, they're out of sight, out of mind.
Right, right. I know the people who I've talked to and the research I've read on people who retire. The ones that do the best are the ones that continue to have a purpose. So the ones that do find some way to serve as opposed to not doing anything. And they generally their life expectancy is much shorter if you don't have a plan like that where you still have a purpose. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And I've seen those statistics too. There's, different points in life that when you have kids, when you retire, when they are major transitional periods that some people do better with than others. And, recognizing that around your community as well, right? You know, uh, nowadays it's your mobile phone, your tribe on your mobile phone that you stay connected to, right? Like recognizing that. And that's a real issue. I don't think I'm ever going to stop working because I'll just redefine what it is that I'm working on.
exactly.
I look forward to that. I don't have this like goal like, oh my God, when I hit 65 or 66 or 63, I'm out. That's it. Don't bother me anymore. I mean, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm trying to pick up speed and say like, okay, well, here's the things I really want to focus on now, and this
Right,
is great. I have more time now to do this that I'm really passionate about.
right, exactly. Well, one last question for you. I know that you're a father, you have a daughter who is an amazing young woman. I got to meet her. We went skiing a couple years back before I moved down to North Carolina. And I know that you're a great father. How has being a father changed you?
Yeah, I'll say this with pride. I mean, when my daughter came into this world, I just lost it. It was a beautiful day.
Yeah,
Still is. Every day is just as amazing.
yeah,
So, to see her grow, I have people that are older. It's like, oh, terrible twos are the worst. I'm like, I don't see it. Every year was great. I mean, I know I have things to work on with my daughter, but I just look at it as a gift. But now she's 20. Now she's focused on her life. And now we're going through different phases. That has been something you have to work towards and work at rather. And she continues to blossom. She's a great young woman, and I'm proud to be in her life. But it's not always easy. But I think again it's taught me patience. Um, it's taught me what an amazing gift it is. Just like all the other people in my life, in my family, and my friendships.
Hmm.
Just a very special one. I mean, she's always at the top of my post-it note every day to make sure I reach out to her in
Yeah,
some way.
yeah, yeah,
We just don't know. We don't know what's coming next, and I hate to like live in this like fear factor, but it's real. It's real. I try to cherish every day. I cherish the time that you and I have with each other right
right,
now. Try to cherish that. So the same with her. I cherish the time I have, the things I have to learn from her, the things that she's learned from me, the way it's reflected, and just try to give time. And I gotta say, I don't think there's things I can focus on and say, God, I could have been a better dad. I could have put more time into that. I'm sorry I did that. But I just try to, be amazed at the fact that, she's this person that just kept evolving. I mean, when she was an infant, it was hard to imagine her as a person, but yeah, she was a person, and then she just kept becoming more and more of a person, and now she's a full-blown person that, you know, on a one-to-one basis with that, you know, snippy Gen Z attitude sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's beautiful too, you know.
Mhm.
So I just have to kind of keep going back to the well and keep kind of, you know, learning from her, and and just be grateful for it, you know, the influence that she has, because I cherish every day,
That's
you know,
awesome.
every minute.
Yeah, it seems to me that she allowed you to experience love on a very deep level that you probably couldn't even imagine until she came into your life.
I had no idea. I had no idea. It was overwhelming. And then it becomes, you know, you have this realization that anybody who has kids or is going to have kids, that this, you're not here for yourself anymore. It's not about you anymore, right? It's about them. It's about your family. It's about you as a unit. And that's a very real awakening, right? And it's hard to explain until it really hits you, you know, in the face.
Right.
And it's a beautiful thing to kind of go through. So that's a great question, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, Dirk, as always, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Great conversation. I know it's going to be helpful for a lot of men. We touched on a lot of different topics. I mean, just I think we hit the gamut, which was it's great. So thanks again. Thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you soon again. And if you liked this video, check out my video and podcast on a topic we talked about, men and friendship, as a interview with my best friend Ron. So check that out. We'll see you there.